Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 7th and tonight's classic is Saw. Now, Saw is by no means the first movie of its kind. It bears more than a passing resemblance to previous movies such as Seven or Cube, but this is the one that gets the classic treatment from me because not only did it make a bunch of money and had way too many horrible sequels, it was also very influential in the horror genre. I have seen Saw before this month. I've talked about it on this channel before. And in the past, I have sung its praises. And watching it a second time, the good things about it are still as good as I remember them being. But there are a few stupid things about it that do come up, especially when you see it a second time. I thought I was going to give this a 9 going into this, but now I'm going to give it an 8. It's really good, don't get me wrong. But again, there are some dumb things about it. The plot of Saw is that there is this serial killer who the press would call the Jigsaw Killer. And the entire thing that he does is that he captures people and sedates them and puts them in saw traps, basically, as they've come to be known as. They're traps where if the person doesn't do something specific, they'll die. And that something is a horrible thing. It usually comes in the form of self-harm, but there's also hurting or killing others. Probably the most famous saw trap from this movie, at least, is the reverse bear trap, where a woman wakes up strapped to a chair with this, metal contraption literally attached and locked onto her face. And she's told via a video that if she can't find the key and unlock it, it will open with such a force that they imply it's basically just going to rip her head off. And when she gets out of the chair, the timer starts, and she has somebody else in the room with her who is, drugged and, they say it was an overdose, so he was going to die anyway, but she has to cut him open and take the key out from his stomach so she can unlock it. That's basically the tone of a lot of saw traps. It's the main theme of all of them is just proving how desperately a person wants to stay alive and what they're willing to do for that. The tapes from the Saw Killer often say everybody is too ungrateful to be alive, and that's the main theme of all the traps that he places. The main plot of the first movie is that there are these two men that wake up in this bathroom sort of thing in this old abandoned building, and they're both chained to pipes with metal chains that they can't break. And it's a lot of trial and error and figuring out what they're supposed to do. There's a lot of steps in the process of getting out of this trap, and it's very interesting and very well done. I will still stand by this. The basic premise of this movie is brilliant, and a lot of the things in this movie are executed in a very brilliant way. Again, there are some stupid things, but we'll get to that later. I think something that they did that was very, very smart when it comes to the tension in this movie is that it's not like when you're in a saw trap, you are destined to die. They're not impossible to get out of. It's just they prove that most people either can't do it correctly, don't have the conviction to do the right thing. The woman who was in the reverse bear trap, her name is Amanda, she gets out. She makes it out of it alive. And it's really twisted, but she says that it helped her with appreciating life because she was a drug addict before it. And I guess that she got off of it when she realized life's too short to be addicted to drugs and stuff like that. And that's a really twisted way of sort of proving the Jigsaw Killer's methods as effective. The tapes that the killer plays for the victims especially sort of puts the burden of keeping the person alive on them. You can live if you make the right choice, if you have a strong enough will. And the police say this, and I don't think this is true. It's not true at all. They say he doesn't actually kill people. He makes them kill themselves. No, he kills people, just in a very indirect way. But most of the saw traps that you see in this movie are in flashbacks. The main plot, most of the movie is focused on the room with the two men in it, a doctor named Lawrence and a photographer named Adam. And they kind of have to work together in order to solve the various puzzles in it. But right at the beginning, Jigsaw sort of plants distrust among them because he tells Lawrence the only way that he would get out is if he tried to kill Adam. And that sort of creates a bit of tension between the two of them. They withhold stuff from each other. They lie to each other about things. And it makes it a lot harder for them to actually work together so they can get out of the room alive. One thing about the movie that I will say is stupid is the editing style. A lot of the editing is just really obnoxious, over the top, and not necessary at all. A lot of times when things really bad are happening, the camera does a bunch of rapid cuts and spinning around really fast. It's this really obnoxious way of visualizing things. And I think it just kind of takes away from it instead of adding to the experience. But that's mostly just a personal preference. And they don't use it all the time, just in a few places. But in my opinion, it's too many places. One thing I did appreciate about this movie is that when it's showing the audience something, it will also show something else, like a flashback or something, to sort of like intensify what they're trying to get across. I'm not going to say that the movie holds your hand, but it doesn't like leave you hanging and like, hey, look, this character is someone from like way in the beginning of the movie that you only saw in one scene. Hope you recognize them because they're not going to let them know. Like when they saw a character that you only saw once, there was a flashback and you saw that character. I think it's better to sort of show the audience what you're trying to get across without holding their hand, as opposed to being way too indirect about it and just leaving the audience confused. Because honestly, there's so much stuff happening in this movie that a lot of the things that they were throwing at me, I probably wouldn't have put it together if they had just left it at showing it, and it was helpful. Maybe I'm just not the most attentive person, but I really do appreciate that happening in Saw. Now, obviously, Saw is not for everybody. It is a pretty gory movie. Not, like, insane, but the ideas in it are, like, disturbing enough without even the images. But if you like this type of stuff, and I really gotta say, I do still appreciate the cleverness of this movie. Despite its flaws, the setup is really, really good. And I kept waiting in the sequels for another setup that brilliant to come up, and it never happens. The sequels kept getting dumber, and I ended up quitting after Saw 4. But the original one, I still think, is a very, very good movie, even if it is flawed in a few places. I would recommend it, it's just not for the faint of heart. Alright, let's talk about some spoilers. The main source of urgency as to why Lawrence and Adam need to get out of the room quickly is because Lawrence's wife and kid are being held captive by an accomplice of Jigsaw, and they need to get out in order to save them. And there's a lot, and it's revealed that Adam was actually hired by somebody else to tail Lawrence, because Lawrence was having an affair and he was like following around taking pictures. And there's another thing that springs distrust from the both of them and causes both of them to lie to each other a few times. By the way, from the beginning, there's this dead body in the middle of the room. They're like, Adam's on one side of the room, Lawrence is on the other side of the room, and the dead body is in the middle, and he was holding a tape recorder that they had to use and like reach over with stuff to grab it. And the big twist at the very end of the movie, something that I actually already had spoiled when I saw it the first time, but I really wish I hadn't, because if I didn't, this would have been an amazing twist. At the very end, once Lawrence manages to get out and leave to go get help, the dead body on the ground gets up, and it's revealed that that person is Jigsaw. And there's a few more reveals about how Adam did the game wrong and he's going to stay in the room to die. I thought that was a brilliantly set up twist. That one I thought was done really well. Now, a bunch of the things that I thought were not the most fair / stupid. The first one was that the very beginning of the movie, I've talked about this in other videos, at the very beginning of the movie, you see Adam in the bathtub, and there's this something that's attached to a light. And when he's like waking up and struggling, he accidentally unplugs it with his foot, and that thing with the light goes down the drain. You don't ever see what it is, but you definitely see that it's gone. And the twist that Jigsaw reveals to Adam at the very end is that that was the key to his cuffs. I don't really think, like, the thing about jigsaw puzzles, once again, is that if you do the right thing, you can get out, but I feel like that was something that was sort of out of his hands from the beginning. You could argue that if he hadn't immediately panicked and started thrashing around when he woke up, if he just stood up and calmly, like, got out of the tub, he wouldn't have unplugged the drain and lost the key, but again, I can't really blame him for freaking out considering the fact that he woke up underwater in a room he didn't know. The other really stupid thing, and I blame Mr. Nightmare for this. He pointed this out, and I could not unsee it once it was pointed out to me. There's a scene where there was a cell phone that was found after one of the puzzles, and it was made to receive calls. And Lawrence's wife and daughter managed to escape from the accomplice. They like overpower him, they get to run away, and they're in safety. And I'm pretty sure that's why she was calling him, and the phone was ringing, but it was out of reach. So he tries to like pick up like a box that was used earlier to reach it, but he can't. So his idea is something that they brought up early on in the movie. They had hacksaws. Each of them had a hacksaw, but chains binding them were too strong. So he makes like a tourniquet and like bites down on his shirt and cuts off his foot. And the phone is done ringing by then, but Mr. Nightmare pointed out he could have just used the hacksaw to reach it. And considering how big the hacksaw was, yeah, he could have used it to reach over, bring in the phone, then like taken the call and heard that his wife and kid is okay. And the police would have come and he would have gotten out without having to cut off his foot. Again, that's kind of nitpicking, but that's also kind of not, because, yeah, that is kind of a logical step, because they used other items to grab at things that the dead body was holding before. Honestly, I think that the sequels have done a lot to sully the original movie's like reputation, because I do think that the original movie, there's a lot of things about it that are brilliant. I think that Saw 1 is a really good, if flawed, movie. I still like it, even after seeing it a couple times, even after knowing about some of the dumb things in it. I liked it a lot, and I would recommend it to you with an asterisk, because once again, this is a pretty intense movie. Still, watch it and draw your own conclusions from it. I'll see y'all tomorrow.